Welcome back to a new video on the Diaries channel. And we just quickly shot a video before this, which is all about how to get job ready. So, what all things you need to have before you can spam apply or apply at 10 quality places, as Sarah mentioned in the last video. So, this video is going to be all about how to actually get a job and how to apply for all of these different jobs or different brands, different corporates, professional jobs even. So we will be talking about all types of jobs. Assuming that we have everything that we've talked about in the previous video. If you haven't watched that video, go watch that video and then come here. But assuming that we have everything that we talked about, you have your cover letter, you have your resume, you have already called the employer, you've set up a good impression. What do we need to do now?
What do we need to do now? So you've got all of your paperwork ready, you're ready to go, you're ready to submit. So it could be a few different ways that you're going to apply for that job. So I'll talk about probably three main ways. So it could be that you have found a job advertisement on a website like Seek or on JobShop. So you're going to follow the steps that they have outlined in the job advertisement for what they want you to do. So they could be saying, I just want your resume. And you can apply through this link here. So you do that link and you follow the step that they're saying. Another option could be you're looking to work at a bigger business. So maybe you're going to work at a supermarket like Woolworths, or you're going to work at a fast food retailer like Domino's. These are big chain organizations. So they actually have a dedicated website to careers, and that could just also be for casual jobs there as well. So they never advertise. They just always have jobs available on their website. So you go directly to their website and apply through their portals that they have got created for jobs. And the other option could be you're walking down the street and you see in the window of a cafe saying, help wanted, we're looking for a barista. Great, let me go home, let me make sure my resume is good for this job, and I'm going to go back, I'm going to walk in at a time that's not peak hour when they're serving a million coffees. And you walk in and you ask to speak to the manager and you go, hello, I'd like to speak to the manager. And the manager comes out, hello, my name is Sarah. I saw in the window that you had a job available. I wanted to provide you with my resume. I'm really excited about the opportunity to potentially work here. They may actually ask you to interview on the spot. They may be like, great, you're here, let's have a chat. What are you looking for? So being extra prepared when you walk into a place that you may then be asked further questions. It's different to when you submit an application and wait for them to review it and then respond.
Be well dressed as well. Don't be in your slides.
Exactly. It's all about presentation when you are going for that face-to-face. So dress to impress.
And this year I've personally seen that a lot of brands have put out expressions of interest as well. So maybe they don't have vacancies at the moment, but they still want to have a pool of candidates who are ready to work there when they need. So probably apply for that as well while you're spam applying for other jobs as well.
Might as well, it's there. Might as well do it.
Might as well do it. But the importance of applying at different websites. And if you're particularly targeting a brand, I would say keep an eye out on their careers website personally.
Yes, absolutely. Check on their careers websites. And you can also, for like things like Seek, you can set up, which is also, Seek is a job website in Australia. You can actually set up email reminders so you can actually track companies that you're interested in. So the minute they advertise a job, you can get a notification in your inbox and you can go, oh no, that's not a job I can apply for. Oh, finally they've advertised a job I can apply for. What do they need? How do I get my resume ready and my cover letter? Let's submit and let's go.
Yeah, the thing with Seek is people don't realize that this is a website that they can use for help. Let's say an international student is coming and they're like, oh, it's just a website, I don't need to care about it. But no, it's actually very important.
Exactly. Make sure you read or understand what the people are looking for when you are submitting for a job. The amount of jobs that we see where we like it's specified resume and cover letter and all that's submitted as a resume, you're not considered because you haven't completed all the steps. Also, if on the careers website for Woolworths, they have got all these fields you need to fill in, you need to fill in all those fields. And if you can't fill in all those fields, then I wouldn't apply for those jobs. Because again, if I've got that on my website as a field I need of information from you and you don't fill it in, if I was doing it as an assignment at university and you miss a whole field, for example, you're not getting a score. So therefore you're not going to get enough of a score to get to the interview stage.
Probably take out time when you're applying for jobs. It's not like, okay, I've uploaded my resume, that's it.
Yeah.
Probably need to take out 10 to 15 minutes, depending on the job ad, to fill in your application and for you to basically be considered, as you mentioned.
Exactly.
And also like editing your CV.
Absolutely.
For each job specifically.
Exactly. It's what we were talking about with the quality over quantity, right?
Yeah.
Don't just spam 50 applications. Spend the time on 10 applications of quality, editing your resume to make sure it addresses the job you are applying for.
Yeah.
And we briefly talked about Job Shop, which is a venture by StudyAdelaide themselves. But I personally didn't know a lot of things which add a lot of value to international students. So would you be able to go in detail about its features, its users, what all it offers, and how does it add value to students?
Yeah, so StudyAdelaide created Job Shop at the beginning of 2022, I believe it was. That was from talking with industry and talking with businesses who were saying, we are desperate for staff. How can we find staff and how can we reach these international students? Because we think that they make fantastic staff in our organisation. So we worked with them, we talked to them, we worked through what they need in terms of jobs, and we built a streamlined process. So when you go on the Job Shop website on StudyAdelaide.com, you can find the jobs that are available, and if you apply through that website, your application is streamlined into their process. So they're actually reviewing those applications faster than they are reviewing applications coming directly from their own website.
Oh, okay.
Because they're seeing its quality coming through, right? And they are not so concerned about your resume or experience. They're more wanting to see, do you have a great attitude? Do you have a willingness to learn? And, are you willing to work hard for them? That's what they're looking for. The other great thing about Job Shop as well is that we have vetted all these businesses, so they are all legitimate businesses paying really great wages for students. They're paying at the casual wage, which is a really, nice hourly rate. And there's also a range of roles available. Job Shop is continually expanding as more and more businesses hear about it and go, how can I jump on that website as well? So we've actually broken it down into segments. So you can go on there and you can see jobs in the retail field, hospitality, business administration. I think there's a section for finance, a section for engineering and manufacturing. So there's always businesses adding to that. And then there are some businesses that have been on that website with us from the beginning and they are still hiring.
Okay.
So Adelaide Venue Management Corporation, who own 3 of the largest venues in Adelaide, they hired over 250 students by the middle of last year.
Oh, wow.
I don't have a new figure on that one, but they are still hiring. So there are lots of job opportunities available on there. And one of the things we were talking about before is if you are planning to come to Adelaide to study and you are maybe a month or less before you leave your home country to come to Adelaide, you can apply online before you actually arrive in Australia, and they may even do your interview online for you before you arrive. You would get the job and you would get a start date for once you've arrived in Australia. And we've met several students who've had that opportunity. So it's a really fantastic option for you to consider and have a look at the jobs that are available there. And then it also leads into, we've got some Job Shop support workshops as well to help you get ready to apply for those jobs, as well as the employment toolkit, which we went through in the previous video, so check it out.
So, for example, if I'm in my home country and I'm applying through Job Shop, so do I use my home country's phone number and address? Or because I'll be applying through an Australian resume, which we talked about in the previous video, but I can use my home address and phone number.
So we spoke to these companies and we said, can you not get hung up on the fact that they won't have an Australian phone number when they apply? And they said, oh, is that the issue? Well, I said, yes, that's the issue. They don't have an Australian phone number. They're like, oh yeah, no, we'll make that work. Not a problem. So they've eliminated that barrier, these companies, that was there beforehand.
I actually faced this issue firsthand because I had to fill some government form when I was starting to study, and they were like, oh, you just fill your phone number. I'm like, it doesn't accept it because I think it's more digits, right? So I can't even apply. So I was like, wait, what?
There's a few systems out there that don't quite figure out the whole.
It doesn't always work.
It was the same with me because I came here during COVID and I was supposed to, like when I was getting my COVID test, they were like, oh, where should we message you? And I'm like, I've just arrived in Adelaide.
I know.
And they're like, do you know anybody there?
I know. We had that as well as my cousin flew in from overseas. He lives overseas, and I had to go take him to get a COVID test. And they're like, "What's your phone number?" And he's like, "I have a Japanese phone number." And I was like, "Just text it to me." So I got his results. But like, if you don't have someone, how do you give those things, right? Yeah.
Like, I have someone who my father's friends know. Can I? Yeah. If you haven't got number,
Just
So
any,
lose
just
acquaintance.
any number.
Yeah.
Any Australian number.
I think
works.
they started adding in email addresses as an option after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I had to give my email address.
Yeah, they started to learn.
So a great asset again,
Yeah.
which is also a part of the Study Adelaide's website. So basically the key points were when you're applying through JobShop, your application gets streamlined.
Yes.
So they know that it's coming from JobShop. The Study Adelaide stamp is already there.
Exactly.
So
And you know that these are verified, fantastic businesses in South Australia as well. No one gets onto that website without being verified by us first. So that was a really important thing, was just making sure that they have appropriate training procedures, appropriate pay, really great circumstances to work in. So that was important to us.
I just had one question. The CVs that you get through JobShop, do you guys check it or does
No,
it
so it doesn't come to us, it goes directly to their
Directly to
recruitment
them.
managers. Yep.
Okay.
So it's
Okay.
basically like a portal
Yep.
Yeah.
where you get a stamp for Study Adelaide.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So that they created pathways that directly lead into them that they can identify comes from our website.
Mm-hmm.
And this morning itself, I was going through JobShop itself. There were a lot of opportunities in fast food restaurants, retail, disability sector as well.
Yes.
Adelaide venue management, as you talked about,
Yes.
and because it's a growing city, a lot of events are happening. So everybody needs staff there as well, and those are on JobShop as well.
I think it's like every month or so in the student newsletter, I'm announcing another business or another couple of businesses have added to JobShop. So I think my newsletter this week has got another announcement.
No, I keep reading those.
Yeah.
I am on the newsletter. I keep reading them.
Right.
Like,
Get your
that's
holy
great, that's
tickets.
great. Yeah. Get your holy tickets.
All of that is great. Now I'm filling in an application. What do I need to have? What all fields do I have to fill? So I've taken out 20 minutes out of my day to fill in an application. What all can I expect in an application?
Yeah, in an application, you're going to need to provide your personal information. So that will be obviously your name, and perhaps you have a preferred name, so you can actually use brackets and say, so for example, my name is Sarah, so it's quite a simple name. But if I chose that I preferred to go by Says, I could put Says in my middle name, right? And then you want to provide a phone number and your location. So you wouldn't necessarily need to put your full physical address because that's not needed on your resume anymore. You would just put maybe your suburb and city that you're living in, particularly if you're in Adelaide, that's important. You're going to include your employment history, your education experience and history. You're going to include any other skills that you have developed, certifications that you've received. You are also going to need to include references. So that was something we really wanted to talk to you guys today about, was references. So generally for any job that you apply for, you need to have 2 references as a minimum. Now references are people who can attest to the skills and experience you are referencing in your application. So as you are probably going to be new in Adelaide, you may not have a lot of contacts in Adelaide. So it's important to think about, well, what can I provide as a reference when I arrive? Is it that someone who's my landlord can talk to the trust and relationship that I have with them, and that I am reliable and pay my rent on time, and I have strong communication with them as well? Is it with a tutor or a lecturer that you have built a good relationship with? Your referees, which is also another way of calling your references, they cannot be your friend who doesn't have any work history with you, and they cannot be a family member. So I can't go and ask my friend over here, can you just pretend that we work together? Because that you cannot do. They must be someone who can talk to your experiences in the workplace, in the volunteering, in the school, or your reliability and character as a person. So providing 2 people's details is really important. You want to provide their name, their phone number, their email address, and their business of where they work. You worked with them. So that way it's very clear to the employer who's looking at you to say, oh, great, so they worked with them here. Let me go give them a call and see what was their experience like.
I personally used one of my lecturers when I just started because I
Yep.
didn't know here. So I know it's hard to, build up your network when you just get here. But maybe if you're living in a student accommodation, ask the manager or
Yeah.
the receptionist. They can be a reference for you, and just your lecturers or your success coach or your course advisor even.
Yeah.
Because they've been in Australia for such a long time, their reference or their word holds value.
Yeah.
I personally I had to, so I didn't know anybody, so I put one of my lecturers from uni and the other one was another lecturer from back home.
Yes.
And they considered it because they thought
Yeah.
that okay, he knows about this person and he can obviously tell us about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And something I did, because I lived and worked overseas for a while when I was coming back to Adelaide, I was like, oh, how am I going to get my reference from the other side of the world when the time zone differences don't work either for them to call? So I actually got a reference letter written by my manager on company letterhead. Now that was more for the professional working environment, but it was just a way that I could show my most recent work history
Yep.
and character without the need for someone to have to be at night time here to call there during the day.
Yeah.
That's the other thing to factor in with overseas references is the time zone differences.
Yeah.
If I'm living in one of the suburbs, for example, Port Adelaide, and I'm applying for a job in the city,
Yeah.
so do they consider that, oh, that person lives far away and maybe they don't have a vehicle and they need that person urgently sometimes because they have to cover a shift? Does that matter? Do you need to be applying for jobs around you?
It helps obviously to look at places that are nearby to you, but it's not the be all end all. You can, I think it's just the way that your attitude is when you're in the workplace with them or when you're greeting them and having interviews, that they can see that you're someone who will make it happen.
Got it.
Right? So it doesn't matter that you live several suburbs away. People will drive or will find transport options to get to those shifts and things like that. So I know, for example, of students who got jobs in McLaren Vale. So that's about 50 minutes outside the city, and not a whole lot of bus options, but they would bus out for their shifts and walk 20 minutes to make their shifts, and they would always be on time. So if you want it, you will make it happen because they wanted to work in the wine industry. They were willing to do that.
Yeah.
Oh, they were working in one of the vineyards.
Yeah,
That's great.
Yeah. So,
Also, with the application process, is there something that you should avoid? Is there something that you would directly see and be like, okay, no, I'm not going to accept this?
I think it's the answers being too short, right?
Yeah.
If they ask you to address any specific questions or criteria in the application beyond a resume or cover letter, make sure your answers are really clear, concise, but detailed, and don't just write one line just to fill the box in to move on, right? Every step of it is important, and so you need to make sure you're valuing it and providing a valid answer for it as well. I think as well, if you skip any spots, that to me is an immediate, you haven't completed the application. So why would I compare you to someone over here who has done everything?
Yeah.
That already puts them in a stronger position. That's probably my main things. And just remember, you don't need to provide things like your photograph or your date of birth or your marital status on your resume or at any point during your application. And one final tip I would have is on our student portal in the employment toolkit, which you can access anytime you want, there is a interview questions document there that's got 3 pages of interview questions you could expect in an interview. But a really great way to help you when you're writing your resume or your cover letter is actually to look at those questions and write some little points and answers to those, because it will help you come up with some of those examples that you might need to actually put into your resume or a cover letter. And then also, if you are called into an interview, make sure you practice before you go. I will still do that now, all right? I will encourage everybody who goes for an interview, no matter if it is your first interview versus your 50th interview. Practice is key, because the examples you demonstrate in an interview is different to how you and I talk every day. And so you want to bring those thoughts to the front of your mind so that you're ready to go in an interview.
Yeah. Speaking of interviews, what kind of interviews can we find here?
Yeah, great question. So there's really probably 3 main types that you'll find in the casual workforce. The first one is you might get a phone interview. So be prepared. Phone call. Hey, you got a few minutes? We might have a quick chat. And even if you think it's just a chat, it really is an interview. And they're just wanting to get to know you a little bit better before either they determine to either give you the job or bring you in for the next stage. Group interviews is another option. So it may be that you are invited to a group interview, you may have 8 or 10 other people in the room with yourself. And everyone runs a group interview slightly differently, but a lot of what we're looking for in a group interview is how do you interact with one another? How do you manage situations and discussions when there may be strong personalities in the room? Are you the person who shies away and doesn't participate? Are you someone who dominates the room? We're trying to see how you are in a group, and it really is about, are you that inclusive person? Are you someone who listens and participates and doesn't need to lead everything? And then the last one could be an individual interview. And when I say an individual interview, you're the individual, but you may end up having 2 or 3 people on the other side interviewing you. Quite often in an interview, they will take notes, so they're writing things down. And I always encourage people, don't be panicked by that. They have to document things. They want to keep notes of everything. So just when they're writing, don't feel like you have to stop talking. They are absorbing everything. And even if they stop writing, make sure you feel like you have covered your question as well.
And in terms of, so for example, I've seen in a lot of applications that I have to fill in an availability chart.
Yes.
What if I don't have my uni timetable till now because the orientation hasn't even happened? I've arrived in Adelaide about 10 to 15 days before my orientation. Then what do I do? Is it easy for me to change my availability, or do employers don't like that? Do you not like people changing their availability every other week or every other month?
Yeah, I think it's important to give whatever availability you currently have to the employer, but as early as possible communicating to them that you are studying, and that obviously comes first, which we all know, but that your roster will likely need to change every semester because you're going to get a new schedule, and they're familiar with that. Anyone who hires casual staff is quite often going to be hiring university students or vet students or whatever, right? They are hiring students, and they get that every semester or every term your schedule changes. So as long as you can kind of maintain some good availability for them and not cut down to like, I can only give you 1 shift a week because they've invested so much in you already. As long as you can give them some variety and options, they get that your scheduling has to change, because whilst your schedule changes, so did 5 other people in the organisation. So hopefully you guys have all worked out that you've all flipped around, exactly, so that it still works okay for everybody. But it's common practice.
I believe a lot of people get just scared to go up to the managers, be like, oh, I won't be able to work this time, and they just don't do it, and it's the time next week. I'm like, okay, now what do I do?
Yeah, proactive communication is so important. Like, things are changing. Just have that conversation with them. It's not a stressful thing. It is literally just being about, I don't want to leave you at the last minute to know this. So I'm just letting you know in about 2 weeks' time, I'll have my uni timetable coming up, and so then I'll need to put in some new availability. And they go, oh yeah, no worries, file it away. They're probably running and doing 5 other things at the same time. But they filed it away, and they go, okay, so now when you come up to them and say, hey, so I do have to change my availability, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, fill it in, no worries, we'll work around it. As opposed to they've already done the roster, and then you come up to them and say, no, I can't do any of those. And then they're like, there's a lot of work that goes into rostering. So you don't want to create more work for people. So proactive communication is helpful.
And even if you have a lot of things going on, maybe you play a sport, maybe you run a business, maybe you're picking up extra units in your degree or anything, just let them know so that they know what sort of a person are you, so what sort of person you are, and that you have a million things going on out there, and then they know that you can work these sort of days, these sort of timings. They can be basically communication skills are priority.
And that's the thing as well, like, when exam time is coming up as well. So it'd be proactively reaching out, for example, in May, and saying, in June, I'm going to have exams. I will not be available for this 3-week period because I'll be studying and then taking those exams. But then after those exams, I've got semester break and I can work all these hours for you. So it's that quid pro quo kind of thing. Like, I'm going to need to retract my hours, but then I can expand them at different times to help as well.
So in the comments section in a job application, would you recommend putting that, maybe if you're, so like March is starting, and then you get your uni timetable in the 2nd week of March or in the 1st week of March, would you recommend putting it in the comments that this is my availability for now, and it'll be changing once I get my uni timetable.
I think you definitely can include that in the comments. Only if there is a comment section there to do so, right? Not every form is going to have that as an option, but if there is, then I would encourage being as well upfront and proactive in that communication. But don't write it as in I'm cutting out all of my hours of availability. It's just going to change from what I've given you now.
Yeah. One of the questions that was asked to me was, we don't really care about your experience, but we care about what kind of personality you have. And
personality is really key, right? So that is one of the things, even in the professional workforce, quite often personality can win sometimes over skills, because I could have someone with so much skill, but they have not got the personality that works within the team dynamic that I have. So as someone who's hiring, I'm sitting here at the interview interviewing you, but I am also thinking about the 15 other staff that are back there working while I'm interviewing you, and the personalities that are in the group back there, and how you would fit into that group. So that is the most, because if you have got the wrong mix, it can just be terrible team dynamics, and the efficiencies and performance of the team are severely impacted. So for example, yes, you may not have the same skills as this person over here, but you have this personality that is going to gel with my team. You've got the right attitude, and your willingness to learn. I will teach you those skills over having the wrong person in the team, because the wrong person can also make me leave my organisation, and then I'm hiring more people.
So you're just stuck in this cycle.
Yeah, exactly.
So with group interviews, what are the things that one would do to stand out? Because I was in 2 group interviews, Adelaide Venue Management and in Sky City, and I was faced with a lot of people who, had much more skill than me. But I think during the interview process, I did some things which I don't really, which I did not intentionally do, which helped me to hire. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's looking for those little sparks and those little hidden moments where, so say for example, you're sitting around a table and you've got an activity to work on. And we're looking at the ones who don't necessarily go diving straight in and being like, I'm going to leave the situation, you're all going to follow me. It's more like there's subtle moments of little moments of leadership that someone's demonstrating when they're like, oh, hey, that was a really great idea. Like, guys, let's try and tie that in. Or can we build off of that idea, as opposed to it being like, if it's not my idea, it's not happening. I feel like some people get caught up in the group interview thinking that I have to be the person with the idea for it to be a successful interview, but it's actually about how do you take others' ideas and work it together and make it better. It could also be someone is really quiet and not really participating at the table. I'm looking for someone who goes, hey, Jane, what did you think? I'd love to hear your perspective on this. It's that inclusivity of things as well. It's that ability to present ideas. So it's communication, teamwork, initiative, all those things is what I'm kind of scoring it on in my own head. A little bit of body language as well. Like if you're sitting there at the group interview like, wow, you look bored and you look closed off from the group, you're not really open. So those are some of the things that we're looking for in the group interview. And then if there's an individual interview, that's where we're actually wanting to get to know you a little bit more as an individual. But the group interview is really about those dynamics, because I'm thinking about my team. Yeah.
And we talked about the positives now. What about some of the negatives that you might see and be like, okay, I do not want this?
Yes. So negatives would be someone who is very dominant the whole time. Or my biggest negative is someone who is late. Someone who is late to the group interview. I mean, in my head, and I'm sure a lot of other recruiters would agree with me, if you're late, you just shouldn't have bothered turning up at that point, because to me, you're already cut. I need to know that you can be on time, engaged. It's that body language piece as well. If you're closed off or you're over the top. I've had someone before who banged the table to grab attention in the group interview, and to me that was rude as well. So it's looking at behaviours that are rude and cutting off people from talking, being like, no, we're going to do this instead. All those things are things that I go, oh, they're just jarring, they're just not going to work in this dynamic. And to be honest, group interviews are hard, because you're put in a room of people you don't know, who you may not get along with, And I feel like sometimes those interviews where there's a whole group of people that just don't get along are the best interviews to watch, because that's when people really get to shine. They get to show their best skills when they're really faced with a difficult situations and stuff. But also the things I don't like are people who don't contribute, who go quiet. And I get there are introverts out there, and I get it's a really tough situation to put yourself in, but sometimes you have to challenge yourself to at least try and contribute a couple of ideas or feed into other things that are happening. Otherwise, you get overlooked.
Yeah, that's how I dealt with the group interview. I was like, okay, it's a challenge. I'm scared, but I'm gonna go do it anyway. Yeah.
Best thing to know about a group interview: everyone around you is all nervous as well.
Yeah. They're all in the same boat.
Yeah, exactly. You're not alone. And then when you're leaving the interview, make sure you do a warm farewell to the interviewers and to your fellow participants as well. I think that just shows someone who's not racing out the door to be done with it. Is just a really nice finish off of it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Quite often you'll get a chance to ask some questions at the end as well. So think through maybe if you want to ask a question, what is a really good question to ask? That sets a really good position in the interviewer's mind as well.
Oh.
Yeah.
Probably what helped me was observing the energy in the room.
Yeah.
So, and tweaking your personality, tweaking your actions according to that.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I'll add one more thing of a note, not what to do in a group interview. I find this happens sometimes in group interviews, is that we'll have a thing where we like go around the room and introduce yourself or something like that. And so the first person starts, and then the second person goes and feels like they have to go longer than the first person. And then it starts snowballing, because then the person after that has to go longer than the person before. And then next minute we've lost half an hour just on hello, my name is.
Yeah.
Domino effect.
Exactly. So, short, concise, direct to the point, polite and friendly are really going to serve you well, as opposed to being like, I have to be the person who talks the most to be seen, because that doesn't help you either.
I think we've both experienced that. I think in the start we went through like 20 job applications, then finally got a hit. They're like, okay, now what? now what do I do?
I thought this was the only step I had to do.
Yeah, you spend so much time on the first step, then you don't even realize, oh, you're in the second step now.
And now there's a time crunch because it's going to happen very soon.
The job interview at Westlakes at one of the McDonald's, and they're like, oh, how will you travel? Are you intending to get a car? And I'm living in the city. I can't get a car because we're in the park. And then, I am. Give me a job.
If I don't, I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
That didn't end up going through, so don't lie on your...
Yeah. Definitely
You definitely need to be
promise,
truthful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those were the basic points that we wanted to cover. And because you've held interviews and talked to a lot of students as well, are there any things that you would like to share that you can use to stand out while you're applying for a job?
Yeah, I think it's having a look at the job advertisement and what they're looking for, and thinking, what is my unique selling point? So, like, a lot of the time, for example, so say you're applying to be an ambassador for StudyAdelaide, which we work with international students, and your first statement of why you should be selected or what makes you different is because I'm an international student. And I'm like, 99% of the applicants are international students, so that is not your unique selling point. You have to dig a bit deeper, because you definitely have more that you could be giving me that is your unique selling point. So think about, what do I have, what experience or skill do I have that I can strongly emphasize that will be a lasting memory for the recruiter. What can I explain or demonstrate in an interview that is a lasting impression? I have to say, there are some interviews that I have done over the years that are years old, and I still remember specific answers because they were so good.
Could you mention some of them? I'm very curious.
Yeah. So there was one where I asked, can you describe a moment when you had a great success? What was your best success you've had? And they gave me this story about how they were playing football and they really wanted to win a premiership, and that was their goal in life, was to win a premiership. And they realised as a team they weren't strong enough to win a premiership because they needed to be better at other things, right? So, for example, for them, they were great at running, but they were terrible at kicking. Whereas another person was really great at kicking, but not great at running. So they started partnering up with each other and going, well, I will help you get better at your running and you can help me get better at my kicking. And it led all the way through to them winning a premiership that year. And so it was a great example for that answer, but it also was a great example for a future question I had on the interview around, can you demonstrate how you were an effective member of a team?
Yeah.
And I think as well with that team thing, a lot of the time when I ask that question, people think I'm asking when they were a leader, but I'm not asking you always when you're a leader. What part of a team were you? Can you follow? Can you be part of a team that's all working towards a common goal, as opposed to being, I'm the leader out front leading the charge? And I just thought it was such a good example of how it wasn't so much their success, it was the group success that they were seeing as the bigger picture, and they all had to work on each other to get there. Yeah,
that's a great story.
Yeah.
If you want to hear more of these sort of tips, tricks, stories that add a lot of value, they Study Adelaide hold a lot of workshops and webinars where Sarah herself is present. So go to these workshops, sign up for them, turn up and chat with her and ask her about her wealth of knowledge. So
exactly. Yeah, fantastic.
Also, I believe you also do tours, right?
Yes, we've got some walking tours on at the moment. So today there's a Central Market tour and cooking demonstration, but we've also got city walking tours. And we've got other activities like speed friending where you can make some new connections as well. So there's a whole range of things. I'm sure if you sign up for the newsletter like you guys have, you'll find something you're interested in. But I did want to wish you all the very best with applying for jobs, and I hope to hear some amazing success stories.
Thank you for turning up, and like, share and follow so that all of us can add value to more people.
Support us. Thank you.